The reality of money is that is men's solution to basically every problem on the planet. Let the money decide. That's their choice. That's what has been ruling this earth for forever. Unless, of course, they get out weapons and solve the problem that way. And war is their answer to all things. So we have to look for something else in order to change this world. And we have to accept the idea that there has to be a change because the world has changed, because there are so many people today that we cannot avoid the reality of change and the consequences of what that change means for each and every one of us. And if we're going to change from money decides to, life decides, we have to understand that, life is time. The amount of time you get is your life. That's what you get. You spend your life, trying to gain every possession that you could possibly find, which is, of course, greed. Or you can try to enslave every person that you can find, which is, lust in one form or another. Or whatever it is. It doesn't matter, because the end result is time is all you get. And when your time is up, you are dead. And when you're dead, whatever truth you identified as yourself, that is what will control whatever the future will be for you beyond death. And there are any number of people who say there can't be anything beyond death. We just don't believe that. It's not going to happen. Dust to dust and all that. But the end result is your life is a miracle to you. You don't know how it began. You don't know how your body was formed. You don't know any other part of any other thing that is real. And then you can argue all this and that and the other thing, but the evidence will prove that you don't know what life is. And if you don't know what life is, you don't know what death is either. So we're going to throttle back and look at living on this planet. And living on this planet means that my time is equal to your time, and your time is equal to my time, and the only real difference between us is whether or not you're taking risks, or you have studied and studied and studied and made contributions that way, or you're just trying to avoid all work entirely, or whatever it is. Those things do matter to our living. Those things don't and do contribute to what has value in life and society. So we have to adjust ourselves to what is true, and true means that some people are worth at least 3 times more than other people. Some are worth more than that. But the end result is, instead of money, we can exchange time. And of course that means that we have to have some kind of throttling mechanism to do that, because money become the solution because you can force somebody to actually work when they're starving to death. If you give them a job, you say, you can eat if you work. And of course that can be true, but when we are faced with the planet of so many people that everything is threatened, everything is threatened, we have to have a different plan, because there's going to be really soon a situation where none of the world basically gets to be happy with what they get, because there are too many of us. You're not going to be happy with the water that you get. You're not going to be happy with the food supply. You're not going to be happy with the people who are trying to create war against you. You're not going to be happy with the terrorists. You're not going to be happy with anything, because that's what you chose. That's where your greed went. Those are the consequences of what you decided to do. And we have to have some idea of where can we go instead of to war, because war means extinction, as obviously so by your weapons of mass destruction, which were chosen by you, which the university provided happily, because that made them gods, and fear them, and so on and so on. So as we look to see what can be done, we end up with the conclusion that of course the university is always wrong. It just decide whatever it is that university forced you to do, or told you to do, or tempted you to do, or whatever it is, manipulated to do, and do the opposite, and you'll be better off, because they have nothing to add to life except fantasy, delusion, and disrespect, or they wouldn't be crucifying all of nature, or they wouldn't be believing in evolution, or thinking they can ignite atoms and control that, or actually they think that atoms will control themselves. In other words, they are terrorists, and you should avoid them in real terms, so that we can actually survive as a planet. If you don't, we will go extinct, because the consequence of their actions is our extinction. So back again to what can we do, and of course the reality is that we all need to eat, we all need to work, we all need to do whatever we need to do to survive, and that means that we all need a job of reasonable proportions, reasonable to each other. You know, I don't really expect anything more of you than you expect of me, and so on. So that being said, we have to understand that groups are groups for a reason. There are, you know, if you look in nature, there are different subspecies of every critter. You know, every bird, every bee, every deer, every dog, whatever it is. There are subspecies, and of course the particular groups within those subspecies all have an identifiable trait. In other words, they are subspecies, so they don't all compete over the very same thing. That's why there are subspecies, because we need to have diversity, and diversity, you know, adds to the environment, adds to the value of life, and so on. But humanity, you know, tries, or the university tries to destroy all diversity. That's their purpose, that's their plan, that's what they do. They destroy every form and every part and everything about diversity. Even when they say we're about diversity, they don't mean it, they don't do it. It's not true. So the primary element of our survival is in fact going to be, we need to go back to the groups which started us. If you are an Italian, you need to go back to Italy. Even German, you need to go back to Germany. If you're born in the USA, you need to go back to the USA. Whatever it is, we need to redivide so that we can identify the groups and start over again. Because, you know, different groups can't blame themselves. You know, if you are, you know, the reason that black people were brought over here for slavery is because they could be identified. They could be identified. He's black, he must be a slave. Or he's white, he must not be a slave. Whatever it is, you could be identified. Couldn't escape. And so that made reality very simple. One or the other. And we need to accept the fact that the idea is that if you're, you know, a part of this group, you should be over here. And if you're part of that group, you should be over there. And, you know, nations should be divided, because that means we can decide for ourselves as a group what it is that we're going to do about money and time and equality and justice and fair play and all of that. We need to decide for ourselves, and we need to, particularly at best, we need to remove the minorities so that we can say, it's not about them, it's about us. And of course, if you have a minority involved, somebody always says, it's their fault. It's not their fault. We're all equal, we're all the same, we're all this or that or the other, and we have to accept it. And we have to live within the boundaries of our own acceptance. And we have to do what we have to do with what we can work with. So the end result of that, of course, is if there are too many Italians, for instance, in Italy to survive there, and of course there are too many Jews to just pack into Israel and so on. You have to then divide up nations. You do. The United States has to be divided into parts and pieces. All of these people, or this whole group belongs over here, and all of that group belongs over there, because the end result is we must enforce population control, and we must enforce resource depletion. You can't have the future, and we must do everything that we can do to help our world survive. And we cannot do that if we have more than one group involved, because they just keep his history proves they're just going to attack the minority. And so we have to remove the minority and solidify it's your fault, it's not their fault. And no, you can't cross the damn border to attack them to solve your problem. You must solve it on your own. You must, make decisions that are appropriate for you and yours. And where, something dramatic happens that is unexpected, that, all of us should help those people rebuild as a world. But if it's your fault, if it's your failure, then we're not helping you at all. And of course, one of those things is that, like in Florida, for instance, a hurricane comes and tears it apart, and a hurricane comes and tears it apart, and a hurricane comes and tears it apart. Well, it doesn't have to. High-rise buildings, of course, seem to be doing very well down there. So, make high-rise apartments only. No new buildings of any kind beyond high-rise apartments, because that opens the ground for habitat for other creatures and so on. Or more correctly, we can't do what you've been doing for the last forever. We are too many people. We have to make decisions that are compatible with where we are today, and all the consequences of what you've been doing for the last 50 years, all the greed and the lust and everything else that you've been doing has consequences. You have to make adaptations because of your consequences, because of the truth of university leads to hell. That's as simple as that. Their contribution is fantasy, delusion, and imagination. Fantasy that we can have whatever we want, we can play God. The delusion that nobody, deaths don't matter, and the imagination that nothing matters, no consequences for us. Well, it ain't true. It ain't true. They aren't gods. They're never going to be gods. They're just taking your money and stealing your lives and enslaving the rest of the world, and threatening them besides with biological weapons such as COVID. COVID was simply released to gain the money. $6 trillion in this USA alone for 100 million shots was the initial Trump accepted cost. 1/6,000th of $6 trillion is $1 billion. That means, well, think about it. 1/6,000th of what they were paid is $1 billion for an experimental vaccine that did more harm than good, without a doubt. So it released the Nazis to create their weapons of mass destruction. Their claim that democracy doesn't matter now. We have the power to make you do whatever we want you to do. We have the power to threaten you with, we'll take away your food. You can't buy nothing. You can't buy, you can't do, you can't think, you can't serve. You can't do nothing unless you do what we want you to do. As is, of course, the Nazi purpose of World War II and every form of tyranny that's ever been. Every form of tyranny that's ever been is the same. We're going to make you do what we want you to do, or we're going to kill you. Because if you don't create fear, you don't create the believer that we have to obey. And so they create fear. And that's how we have to adjust to them. Instead of letting them create rules that let them rule over us, we need to create laws that make us equal with the leader, so if the leader disobeys the law, we'll go to them and say, you disobeyed the law, you are in trouble with us, you will be punished by us, and things like that. Which is, of course, if you go attack somebody else, we're going to go after the leader, which is world law. It's not go after the nation, it's go after the leader who caused the problem in the first place. That's world law. And enforcement, of course, is stay inside your boundary. No, you can't solve your problem with war over us. You can't. We, the world, won't let you.